Alright, so I wanted to get my thoughts about Hades 2 out after playing this game for, well, maybe a little too much time. First game did feel like lightning in a bottle though, and it is really hard to make something like that strike twice, so I don't think that this game is going to have the big cultural blast that the first game did, but Hades 2 overall is so far just a much better and improved version of Hades 1. Now, this game is in early access and it probably won't be fully released until next year at some point. There's no official release date yet, but that seems to be the case based on some of the things the devs have said so far around how long they want to be testing this game for. And since this game is in early access, there are some things that are missing. One of the more notable things is that some art assets are not present yet, and some characters just look like they're simply cloaked, or they look like concept art right now. Most of the trinket items you get as well, they don't have any artwork associated with them yet, and there's a weapon that is not available yet, and it seems like there's a couple gods that aren't implemented into the game yet. I will admit the gods missing piece is a bit of an assumption by me, but there are a couple that are missing from the previous game, and even though this game is in early access, it does actually feel like a pretty full package. You're getting the value out of this game that you would want, even though it is still early. Now, like most people, I really enjoyed Hades 1, maybe even borderline loved it, and the gameplay loop was hyper addictive in that game, and the atmosphere, the art direction, the voice acting, and the characters, they're just all top shelf amazing. Now, I was by no means a multiple heat level pro, but I cleared the base game and had a good amount of fun post game. I have a physical copy of Hades 1 on the Switch. Because of this, it was a really great game to actually play on airplanes or on a car trip, or even when you're taking a good old fashioned dump. And I feel like Hades 2 is going to be basically the exact same thing for me, as it is Steam Deck verified. Now, Hades 2 is a direct sequel to Hades 1, and it takes place sometimes after the events of the first game. And everything you loved about Hades 1 from the gameplay perspective is here and just further expanded upon. Many of the familiar characters that you loved from the first game do make a return. There are some that we don't see yet, but there are a lot of new characters that definitely parallel some of the old characters, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But like the first game, this is a roguelike where you live, die, repeat with quick, snappy, and satisfying combat. You can upgrade yourself with the power of the gods by collecting their various boons during your run into the night, temporarily empowering yourself. And while you do lose all of your boons upon death, you can upgrade yourself permanently by upgrading your weapons, your encampment, your trinkets, your companions, and there's a whole new tarot card system that also enhances you as well. Now, while there are a lot of things similar, the question gets raised of what exactly is different in Hades 2. The most obvious difference here is that you're playing a new character who, like the previous protagonist, is a child of the god Hades. But instead of being raised in the house of Hades, she is instead raised by witches, and because of this, the game has an overall different vibe, I feel, to it. Now, Hades 1 was much more fire, brimstone, opulence, and kind of used a more yellow and red color palette, but this game feels more witchy, magical, and rustic, and uses a more green and black color palette. But that isn't to say that this game doesn't have colors or use a lot of colors. All the different characters in this game and all the different gods all have very unique colors to them, and the fact that the world is a little dark allows their colorful abilities to kind of pop out a little bit more. Now, what I mean by the game feels more witchy and magical is that because she's a trained witch, most of her moves tend to feel a little bit more on the magic side. Now, she does have physical weapons like the axes and the swords, but the first weapon she gets is actually the witch staff, which kind of feels odd because a lot of the promo material for this game shows her with her swords in the main artwork. And as mentioned, your base, instead of being the opulent house of Hades, is now a witch's covenstead in the woods. And instead of having a contractor build up and upgrade your base, you cast spells and a cauldron to upgrade your covenstead as well as yourself.
Domnoski Traxon.
So it shall be.
Now, I do love things to be spooky themed and a Halloween themed vibe, but honestly, I think I kind of like the House of Hades just a little bit more. And that's not to say I don't like this. The difference of anything is extremely marginal. If House of Hades was to be a 10, then this is probably a 9.5. And some of the stuff could just be a little bit of nostalgia, and the witchy woods might grow on me, but I will say that the Covenstead is way more streamlined and easier to get around compared to the House of Hades. And when it comes to the gods of this game, they are all amazing and all have their distinct looks and personalities, and most of the gods have actually gotten a makeover in this game. Some are way more extreme than others. For example, Chaos has probably got the biggest overall change, but artwork in this game overall is just amazing, just like the last game. And as for all the new side characters, they're all just as great and bombastic as the gods themselves. One of my new favorite characters is Narcissus.
Yeah, just totally. I mean, right? Here we go again.
And he unfortunately doesn't have any artwork associated with him yet, but when you find him, he constantly gets your name wrong, and he's looking at his reflection in the water, and he's just bringing that same energy that Nick Cage had in the movie The Unbearable Weight of My Massive Talent, and I just love it. Now when you die, you kind of console your little frog friend who doesn't speak to you, And there is Dora, the ghost, but she doesn't really talk about it. She's charming, but I feel like she's kind of filling that role that Dusa had a little bit. Although I would say the spider in the woods also kind of fills that Dusa role a little bit as being that creepy monster made cute category. And I'm pretty sure, much like Dusa, this little spider is going to generate some very morally questionable artwork that's going to circulate the internet. And while a lot of these new characters are great, I feel like they parallel a little too closely to some of the previous characters. Odysseus pretty much serves the exact same purpose that Achilles did in the previous game. And now instead of having Thanatos be your rival, Nemesis is your new rival, who I think Nemesis looks really awesome. She's a rival that's a bit more antagonistic and kind of annoying to run into. I feel like I kind of enjoyed some of the previous versions of these characters just a tad more. Kind of miss Hypnos' banter when you respawned. I'm sure he's probably going to wake up, it's just not in the game yet. But I also kind of just miss Hades pressing you and talking smack to you once you died. This could just be that these characters just haven't had enough time to grow on me, but I would really just love to spend some time with Nemesis and have her grow on me. But that said, I am enjoying most of these new characters, mostly Narcissus, Dora, Echo, and Hecate. Characters and story are kind of secondary in this game. Let's talk about the more important thing, and that's the combat. So how do the weapons and all the boons compare to this game? Are they new? Are they fresh? What are they like? Well, so far all of the god boons seem pretty useful, and they all seem like they can have a very useful purpose. While these things do kind of rely on luck a little bit, I feel like I haven't ever been truly screwed over as of yet. Where Hades 1, it did feel like if you didn't get the multi-dash, then you might as well just reset your run, which that seems to be gone from this game. And while most of the gods have returned, there are a few missing, like Ares and my old favorite Dionysus. One of the newer gods, Hestia, is the god of hearth, and she kind of feels like she is taking the place of Dionysus a little bit, as where Dionysus would get enemies drunk and kind of poison them and give them a damage over time, she scorches them with fire. But there are other aspects to her and her abilities that do make her stand out and feel unique and different compared to him. As for the weapons of the night, they do have some similar archetypes, but they do feel pretty unique and different and just really fun to play and great to use overall. I don't know what I would consider my favorite yet, but I would say the Twin Flame is probably my least favorite so far. But like the last game, you can give them different aspects, which will allow the same weapon to play differently. Once you start grabbing different boons on your individual runs, that further just makes each weapon seem way different than before, which just gives into that gameplay loop of how no run ever feels exactly the same, which is one of the greatest strengths that the first game had, and it definitely carries over heavily into this game. And the gameplay loop so far feels like more of the same, but they did tweak it and add a couple little systems that just add on to it and complement it, and honestly, this is great because the first game already had great and amazing gameplay, so I wouldn't want them to drastically overhaul and change it. So far, everything they've done and added onto it and improved, it just overall is positive, and I'm totally digging it. And as for the story, I don't really want to get into spoilers yet because, well, this game isn't out yet, and two, it's not completed yet. It ends on a cliffhanger, and it lets you know that there's more coming. So far, I like Hades as a villain much more than Kronos. Sure, we probably just haven't seen enough of Kronos yet, and he does have more impressive feats of power, and his abilities definitely look way cooler, but I just don't feel that same sense of intimidation that I did from Hades when he would yell and barrel down on you and talk down to you once you return to the house. But overall though, if you enjoyed Hades 1, I see no real reason that you wouldn't like this game at all, unless the new look and feel just shuts you off completely for some reason. Is it more of the same? Yeah. But it's a good thing. They're just adding on to the same thing in more positive ways. So one of the biggest issues that Hades 1 did have was that there was only one path to run. This game actually fixes that issue. It gives you multiple paths to run, and both of them feel very different. I will say I'd prefer some of the zones in Hades 1 more. I don't really like Oceanus, that boat, boiler room, steam room feel. I'm not really digging it, and while I like the concept of the Fields of Mourning, I'm just not feeling it. But when it comes to the bosses, they are way better in Hades 2. I really enjoy the Sirens. I think the Cyclops is awesome, and I'm really glad that the Hydra from Hades 1 is gone, at least for now anyways. I do miss Theseus and Astraeus, who just had a lot of fun and witty charm to them. There are mini bosses in the game that do very much mimic the moveset of the Hydra and Theseus and Asterius, so it feels like you're playing against them, but mini bosses don't have any personality to them. So the thing I loved most about them was their personality, and that's just not here. And as I touched on before, I do really miss how when you would die in Hades 1, Hades and Hypnos would kind of talk down to you after you died. Nobody really makes fun of you dying in this game, and it's weird, but I miss that. Like I said, you can talk to your pet frog to vent, but it's just not the same as Hypnos and Hades talking down to you. And having Hypnos and Hades talk to you just did a good job of making you just want to go right back at it again. and it really is an element that I miss. I wish that Hecate would kind of chastise you like a disappointed teacher or something when you die. Maybe depending on what killed you, she could give you a condescending hint, but this isn't really her character. So, and speaking of dying, this is very much still a get good game, and that can turn some gamers off that are more casual and laid back. Overall, I don't think this game is hard by any means, but I can see the annoyance of if you keep dying to a boss, it can get frustrating. And since the boons are a little bit luck dependent, I can see a lot of people where if they keep dying, they're gonna blame the boons instead of learning and getting better. But I think this game, like any other Souls game or roguelike, is essentially just learning, and it's a lot of trial and error, and you just have to learn and get good. And once you get a nice big dick of knowledge, you can spank down any boss with it, or probably in this game's case, a magical strap-on of knowledge, which, hey, maybe that's the missing weapon. I'm gonna go talk to Nemesis about it.
No. Look.
There was one big negative in Hades 1, and that still has kind of carried over into this game, which it is actually a negative that most games of this type tend to share, that sometimes there just ends up being so much stuff on screen, you can't really see what's going on, and suddenly you just find yourself taking damage for something you didn't see or couldn't even see. And this doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's kind of annoying, and I'm honestly not 100% sure how you can fix something like this. I think it just kind of comes with the territory of a game like this. But overall, I think this game so far is looking good and is simply just amazing, and I would really just recommend checking it out. The story is the only thing that kind of has me with a little bit of contention, but we just don't know how that plays out yet, and it's probably going to be a while before we get to see it. The story really just comes secondary to the gameplay loop, and the gameplay loop is really the best part, and it's definitely improved upon in this game. But these are just my thoughts so far. And if you've played it, let me know what you think of it, and if you found any crazy combos or had any crazy builds so far. I haven't jumped into what the quote-unquote meta is for this game yet, but I have found that having crazy sprint speed is actually pretty useful for boss fights. I also have had a handful of fun hitch AoE burst builds going on that I've really enjoyed, but unfortunately a lot of these kind of AoE burst builds aren't really that useful for when you fight against Kronos. But I have found that the Trials of Chaos, they really do give you some fun and wild builds to test out, which I think that's pretty good because it helps teach you what can and can't work and what synergizes together. As always, let me know why I'm wrong and where I'm off, and as always, drive fast, take chances. Later, nerds.
Thus did Melinoe, the Underworld's vengeful daughter, cross the deepest reaches of her realm to thwart her ancient, hateful foe, the Titan Kronos. Time itself, and time supposedly cannot be stopped. A claim the princess has her reasons to dispute. Hers is a tale that shall withstand time, yet it requires time as well. For now, a cruelly abrupt end shall have to do.
No! Return to Shadow now.